Is this Mr. Crow?
It is.
Well, welcome aboard. So shall I call you Crow? Is that the name?
That is what folks call me, yes.
All right, great, Crow. Well, listen, I thank you so much for joining me here tonight on Late Night in the Midlands. And I was spending a little time on your YouTube channel, and I got to tell you, it's kind of mind-blowing. So I thought, it really is. I thought maybe we'd start out a little bit of your background. What got you so interested in the deceptions and the lies that are pulled on the people, and then take us through it a little bit.
Well, I suppose most of the stuff you see on my YouTube channel had its kind of beginning in the mid-'90s when I purchased my first 8-inch robotic scope, a very kind of quality scope. At that time, I followed NASA. I subscribed to the telescope magazines. I was out with my film camera trying to replicate Hubble images and that kind of thing. And as time went on, I began to discover that it's all a charade, and that the things we're being presented with are not correct, and they're not correct intentionally. And there was a gap. I went into the Marine Corps for a while, did some other things. I was a roadie for a number of years when I got out of the Marine Corps, setting up bands and that kind of thing. And then I got back into astronomy, and in 2012 it all really changed up. I had been viewing for a while, but the night of the supermoon in 2012, we spotted some objects transiting the moon, and so I got a camera, and not long after that, I filmed the best version of the lunar wave we have, and that's really what kind of put my nose to the grindstone.
I see. And what is that lunar wave? I seen that. As a matter of fact, before I even started getting requests from listeners to have you on, I actually, somewhere I came across that video and I seen it, and I thought it was interesting then, and I think it's interesting now. What exactly is that? I seen somebody had left a comment on one of the videos claiming that it was a camera defect. I don't know about all that. It looks like a little more than that to me.
Well, this is one of the problems with having a forum like YouTube to show your stuff. It's instant gratification. People come watch a video and make a snap judgment. They do not take the time to really investigate things in most cases, and the 2012 footage demonstrates that it cannot be camera related. One of the proofs in that footage is that I panned below the moon. Just by chance, the wave started. I didn't notice it, and I panned back up to the center of the moon, and the wave caught up to the camera. So I filmed it starting, panned above it, the wave caught up. But sometime later, we also noticed that there were energy pulses going on at the same time the wave starts. And after time, a video engineer demonstrated that in that footage, it was filmed at 8:30 in the fall evening, that the wave is not crossing the video frame. And that sets aside the fact that digital equipment does not fail in an organic way. Most people are familiar with how digital equipment fails. It pixelates, it makes very straight, non-organic lines. It is a filmed event. If you ask me what it is, which I think you did,
yes.
That's a little tougher, because anything that I can say here now, most people will have trouble with, because they have not done the level of research and put in the time that I have to view the moon and film and put it all together. But for my money, it's some sort of a facade. I no longer accept that the moon is a rock in space, and I no longer accept that anyone could stick a boot on it if they wanted to. Most people that hear that, it'll be a bridge too far, but I make no apology or retraction.
I hear that. Now I would also say, for anybody who says it's a camera defect, I would say duplicate it. Show it to me again. You know, like defect.
Well, there's a number of people who have set out to debunk and done 20, 30 videos in a row aimed at debunking it, and I think the best they came up with is an airplane did it. The problem with that is you can see an airplane coming for minutes sometimes. You can hear them, and you get ready to film that, because that's an interesting thing to film when you're sitting out there for hours, maybe filming nothing. And the truth is there is no footage that will replicate what's in the 2012 footage. I believe something like 9 people have filmed it between 12 and 16 times now. the initial filming that I did in at the fall equinox of 2012 is the best by far, and there's nothing that even holds a candle, nothing that replicates the energy pulses, the fact that the wave goes out of frame, and just kind of the very distinct, solid, overt look of that 2012 wave. But there it is. People see something like that, and one human response that you get is, "What the hell is that? It can't be real. I need to explain it away."
That's true. That's true. So then if you don't accept the moon as a rock in space, then are you saying that it's really not there, or are you saying that we're not seeing the real one that is there? I mean, or is this all just a hologram?
I started by trying to describe it as a hologram, and what happened is people latched onto that word and then started to say, well, how would the technology work? Where did the power come from? They even made erroneous statements like, well, how can that be? The Greeks saw it, the ancient Greeks saw it, which is not a logical way to go at this, because we see a moon in the sky, and I'm saying these things, so presumably anyone 1,000 years ago saw what we see. But to set all that aside, I call it a facade now, so that people don't get hung up on trying to figure out what that technology could be, because clearly whatever it is so far beyond anything we're familiar with or anything we've been told about or shown. It's kind of a waste of time to go down that road without more evidence and more information, right?
Right, absolutely. But now, if it really, so then you're saying that we've never been on the moon. Then we've never actually gone there. We can't get there. And so we're kind of prisoner. And believe me, I'm not debating any of this, because how do I know? I'm curious as to, how one gets there. I mean, how did you finally get to that point where you said, was it the wave that did that for you, or was it other?
Well, to be honest, the way when I first shot it took me a while to realize, because I kept, thinking this has to be my camera defect somehow. And I'd actually at one point thrown the clip in the garbage on my computer, and that very same night I had an epiphany and restored the clip, because I realized what the camera pan meant, and then it all began to fall in place for me. And then it took me a year and a half to demonstrate that you could replicate filming another lunar wave. But the truth is, part of it is experiential. When you spend thousands of hours looking at something, there's a kind of learning that goes on that is different from the way you learn in school. It's almost intuitive in a way. It's what I call experiential learning. But the problem with experiential learning is you can't really communicate that to someone else. Matter of fact, you flat out can't.
Yeah.
They would either just choose to believe it or not. But you can logically deduce many of the things I've seen if you take the time to do it. I often say we live in the HD age, the high def age, and I make the statement, anything amazing that can be filmed in the high definition age will be filmed. And having said this, there's some things that people can go out and do for themselves. Rocket launches is one of them. There is no ground-based footage of a rocket going all the way. They arc out hard over the ocean, and many of the pieces of footage we can get our hands on, and there's lots of it. You can see the rocket coming back down, but most, as the hard arc begins to happen out over the water, the video cuts. We don't have any uncut video of a rocket going all the way, and that should tell people something. There's other things, like when I've been out filming, can't tell you how many fireballs I've seen in the sky in all these years of being outside looking at the night sky. Mm-hmm. We're told those are rocks from space, which I do not accept, but if I was to accept it and then look up at the moon looks like it's been in a shooting gallery. It looks like it's been hit every day of its life since it became a moon. But the truth is, what we find is nothing has ever changed on the face of the moon in any way. And not only that, NASA released some video calling it 4K video of a meteorite hitting the moon, and it was laughable. It was crappy video, it was out of focus, it was black and white, it was a low frame rate, and a little light appears where the supposed asteroid hit. Truth is, the moon looks just the same as it did the first day I ever looked at it, as far as I can tell. And I think there's a reason for that. I don't think it can be hit in the way that we would think something hard hitting something hard. To top it off, I think there's good reason to believe that the moon is not reflecting sunlight at all, that it is emanating its own light source. And a lot of people like to bring up the biblical passage, and while I stay away from religion on purpose, because it seems to cause more trouble than it solves, the biblical passage does call it a lesser light. And to be perfectly fair, though I am never openly religious anywhere in public, that is a pretty darn good description of what I think is going on.
I see. So then would that also mean like the sun and Jupiter and these, I mean, what about the sun?
It's just not what you have been told it is. It's not a nuclear furnace in my view. See, you get to a point where you realize you've been lied to so much that a sane thinking individual has to at some point say, I no longer accept anything from NASA. They have told some whoppers like the Apollo missions. I mean, is there a bigger lie than that in our world? I wonder. But how can you accept anything from an organization that has clearly constructed just complete fantasies and then fed it out to a planet believing these lies? So once you throw that aside and you begin to think for yourself, you begin to realize that what they have done is fabricated descriptions of space, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars. It is all fabricated descriptions. That doesn't get us a lot closer to what we're actually looking at, and the truth is, what we can know for certain is we are looking at light. Though there are a lot of people, the Flat Earth movement, and people constantly try to associate me with Flat Earth, but I only talk about the things that I personally have time to research, investigate, and experience and observe. And while I think what the Flat Earth movement is doing is critically important, I also think there's a hell of a lot of misinformation in that community. But there's a lot of evidences coming out of these people challenging what is this world. And I have said for years now that the very world we are living on right now was intentionally misdescribed.
And I can relate there. I say all the time, question everything. I mean, how can we? I even some of the physicists that I'll have on the show, I'll ask them, how do you know for sure Mars is what they say it is? I mean, they lie about so much. I mean, the only way I could be sure of anything that's up there is if I could touch it with my own hand. And I mean, outside of that, I think it's definitely open for discussion, and I think that we'd probably be surprised. I mean, many of us at the lies we've been told. But here, another point with the sun is, I don't know where you stand with the whole UFO phenomena, but I have seen videos of objects near the sun, and I've often said, well, if that's the case, the sun can't be as hot as they say it is, because wouldn't these crafts melt? I mean, so I don't know. So, the sun might not be what they say it is. So I might have to agree with you there.
Well, I mean, the whole UFO thing is problematic. And the reason, in my view, that it's problematic is because the onset of kind of aliens and UFO and the consciousness really came to us in the 50s, and that was pushed at us through media. And for those of us who are even mildly awake at this point, we understand what movies and media are. They're a complete psyop. They're the thing that makes this world spin. They're the thing that makes this, well, I shouldn't say that. They're the thing that makes this world go around, and they're the thing that make people live in the dream state. They set the table, they fashion the lie, they insert the false reality, and then they bolster it over and over again, so people just accept what they're told. But the problem with UFOs, beyond the fact that really our first, inkling that could be a possibility was brought to us through movies, and, then everyone kind of said aliens look like the gray because that's what they were presented with, is that you really have to have some extraordinary evidence to make these claims. I've shot an endless line of basically UFOs with my telescope. They cannot be identified. They don't match anything we've ever been told about or any description of things we've seen, and there's a hell of a lot of them. The problem is, in my view, those are all terrestrial in nature. They're doing something secret. They're probably have to do with maintaining the lie that we've been fed. But to come out and say these are aliens or, something from another galaxy, if there is such a thing, or another dimension, if there is such a thing, you can't just simply see a thing in the sky and make that claim, because we can fly. We can make amazing things that fly. Lord only knows where our state of technology is. You would really have to see something quite amazing to draw that line, and I've never seen it. Everything I've seen is flying pretty much in a straight line with few exceptions. I have filmed a few things that were not flying in a straight line, and in my view, they're terrestrial.
I see. Well, and then that leads us to the question then, if what you're saying is absolutely true, then, I mean, this question came about beforehand, but now even more so, then who are we and what are we doing here? Because it's almost like somebody decided to buy a sea monkey kit and they put the bacteria in the water and they said, okay, I'll be their god. And I mean, how?
Well, let me come at that in a different way.
Okay.
Some of the things we're talking about here is that we're living in a giant construct, that media, Hollywood, the powers that be on this world fabricate, push, and ensure that none of us understand our place in the scheme of things, or even what this place is. And so it should tell everybody something, if you can think with any modicum of logic. How is it that there is a race of beings here that have no idea how we got here, when we got here, what this place is, what we're supposed to do when we're here, just these basic things that common sense should dictate. We should know these things. How is it that we do not? And I think, in my view, it is a proof that the things we are talking and saying here are not just possibly true, but very likely true.
Very well said. I'll tell you, Mr. Crow, very convincing, to say the least. I've always thought that, okay, if we did go to the moon, and I've kind of thought that we did, but if we did go to the moon, I said, well, then they're obviously not showing us the real footage if they did go. But, I mean, what you're saying could very well be true, too. I mean, again, they say, well, what about the astronauts? And let's face it, I'm sure they signed their lives away when they got involved with NASA. So even if they did or didn't, they couldn't tell us.
They're actors. I mean, cut to the chase. They're actors. We can demonstrate that all the imagery and video we've been handed, which incidentally, none of the original material of that video exists because it was accidentally erased by NASA. How is that? The greatest achievement of mankind. But we can demonstrate, it's not an arguable point, you can demonstrate that all of that stuff was faked in a soundstage. Now, that doesn't get you all the way there because, as you mentioned, maybe someone could say they went to the moon, but it was so secret that what they handed us was just, something for us to look at.
Sure.
The problem with that is I was a very, very young kid when we went to the moon, and nothing has happened since. And you can look at any given thing on this world, and you see a progression. Take a motorcycle as an example. When you look at the earliest bicycles that become motorcycles, you can see a progression. They get better, they get more powerful, they get all these things till they get to a point, and then they become crap again. They become plastic, and, they downgrade, but they still function at a higher level most of the time all the way up. Look at what we're being presented with as the new vehicles that are going to the moon from the kind of actor Elon Musk, the next actor who's going to be a private corporation when NASA dissolves because they've got to maintain these lives forever. NASA is going to go away, probably in my lifetime. I would be surprised if it doesn't. But they've got a private corporation who will be answerable to no one, not that NASA was ever very answerable. And the actor Elon Musk, who was in Iron Man the movie, he just showed up on Big Bang. He's an actor. Actors show up in media and movies. That's what this man is doing. He's shown you what he is. The problem here is that the progression is just a better paint job on the same technology we were shown back in the 60s. And that doesn't work. But if you want to look at the fraud that is the construct of this world we live in, take something like a hot air balloon. If you look at that first hot air balloon that we're told was the big first flight, lighter than air flight, someone figured out hot air rose. I think it was 16 something. I don't know if I have that century right, but I believe it was 16 or 17 something in France. Everyone's seen the picture of the balloon in their high school textbook.
Yeah.
Where's the progression? So one day we could fly. So where is the damn progression? We don't see really much of hot air balloons again. They've kind of inserted them now that there was a hot air balloon corps in the supposed Civil War in America. But it's poppycock. It's malarkey. It's a fabricated construction, you see. Because if you wanted to say who built the megalithic monuments, if you want to accept that the ancients did that, and you really have no basis to accept that, you're just taking someone's word for it. But they built these amazing things like a pyramid or whatever. They moved these amazing stones. If that's even true, you would think they would know hot air rose, right? Why didn't they have a hot air balloon? There's problems, logical problems in all of it. But when you look at timelines of how things are invented and how they improve, like the cell phone, look how far a cell phone has come in just this short while. We're basically all holding very powerful computers in our hands now. In my lifetime, there was no such thing as a cell phone, and the first ones were as big as a damn brick, and if you held them by your head, you'd probably die of cancer in an hour.
That's true.
So the progression is not there, and it demonstrates the fraud.
All right, I've got I think it's a question here from one of the listeners. Let's see here. Okay, it's from Neo. He says, tell your guest that I bought the Planet 7X documentary video. I don't know, he might be thinking I've got a different guest on here. But anyways, it's got to do with Planet X, and you would have to say that that's obviously fabricated too, if the moon is, right?
Well, it's a logical thing. It's another one of these things that Planet X has been coming forever, but it never gets here. And for my money, I will bet everything I own that it never does. You're looking at a construct. Everything you know of space and moons and planets and galaxies and all this other stuff that we have accepted as real came to you through Star Trek. Then it was reinforced by Star Wars, then it was reinforced by NASA, then it was in your school books, but it is all a construct, you see. Because if there was a space and we had been there, you wouldn't hear things like, not too long ago, I don't remember how, it's been a year or two, they discovered a new ring in the supposed Van Allen belts, and they described it as a glass wall. Well, no. You told us Apollo astronauts went through the Van Allen belts a number of times. How can you be discovering any new belt called Van Allen and not only calling it a glass wall, but I mean, we even have footage of, I don't know who it was, Cernan, maybe it wasn't Cernan, one of the astronauts being asked about the Van Allen belts and couldn't even tell you whether or not they went through it. You see, we're looking at actors and a construct. We don't know what space is. I can tell you that the coded meme in media and movies points to space being water. If I was going to talk about what's in old religious texts again, you would hear the waters divided from the waters by the firmament. See, you get these memes and these codes, but I can't tell you if that's true. Like you said, I would have to go there. But what I can tell you is the construct in the description you've been handed of space, moon, planets, all that stuff is just, it's a construct. That's all it is. What we can know about it for now is that we're looking at lights.
And now, with that in mind, that takes me to, there's got to be some group of person on this planet who is aware of all this, besides you, and they got to know that we're in some kind of prison planet, I guess. And so I wonder why they're going along with it. Like, who's pulling their strings? Why?
Well, it's about control, isn't it? I mean, at the base of things, what do we see? We see control. So many people live their lives in America the free, and they think they're free. You're not free. You work until April for free to pay your taxes, right? You follow an endless number of rules and laws, and there are more every year. Your birth certificate is actually an indicator that a corporation was set up on the day of your birth in your name, and you're being traded as chattel. You are not free. See, you have willfully gone along with a group of people who have always had the power. Look at the royalty. Look at the Vatican. Look at people like this. They have always had the power, the best education, all the land, all the money, and they have never lost that. And I think in the last interview I did, look at Downton Abbey, this big popular show everyone loves, where they're smearing it in your dang face. There is a group of people that are better, the special people, the royal people, and then there's all the help. Well, you see, the special people speak 6 languages. They have more money than they could ever spend. They own all the land. They make all the rules. They got it all, including access to all the most critical information. Yet the people working for them, me and you, may not even read in the construct we're being handed. So it's a logical deduction. These folks have always had the upper hand, and they have spent lifetime after lifetime after lifetime ensuring that they can maintain that control.
Man, I thought life was a mystery before. It's just gotten more of a mystery here, because that makes me just all the more curious. You know, I mean, if we are just in some kind of cardboard box sitting on somebody's desk right now, I'd sure like to know about it. I mean, I feel like I can handle it. I've said it before. If Mickey Mouse is God, if he created us, fine. I just want to know.
Well, Mickey Mouse had a big part in creating what you think we are and where you think we are. Walt Disney is so damn complicit. I mean, they just bought the Star Wars thing for a few gazillion dollars. What's that called? The Force Arises? I mean, people are basically sleepwalking. They don't understand what is going on and what these movies mean and what is being rubbed in their face every day. It's a sad state of affairs where people have been convinced that life is to be an amusement park, basically, and they can't see that the title of a movie, the content of a movie, a song, the media, words have meaning, and this stuff is being flaunted in your face daily, but you have been taught, to think in a way that takes it all out of context. When you push aside the training that you've had your whole life on how you should think, how you should learn, when you throw all that away and begin to think on your own, let me tell you something, man, it's a whole new experience. There is a different way to know things. There is a different way to learn, not just memorizing what a textbook or a teacher tells you and getting an A because you could remember it. There is an intuition, a higher level of human being that kicks in, you see, and you know, you said it. Mickey Mouse played a huge role because Walt Disney was his manufacturer. They're out pushing the whole Star Wars thing right now, but I guess that's maybe a whole other interview.
Yeah, it probably is. And I'll let people know the lines are open. If anybody wants to call in, you got a question or a comment, we got a few minutes before a break coming up. 803-392-4566. You can also hit us on Skype. The Skype ID is LNM Radio. And I do have a few questions coming in from via email. One is Annie, and she's in the UK. And she says, your guest says that nobody has gone past low Earth orbit. She says,
correct.
If that's the case, then how did the technology get out there? I guess to...
Annie, cheers to the UK. Thanks for the question. I wish I could tell you. I don't have the ability to answer that question. And one thing I try not to do in interviews is state that one thing is a fantasy and then replace it with another fantasy. And if I was to answer that question like I had some insight or some way to know about that, I would just be simply creating a new fantasy. Maybe it's always been that way. Maybe this is how 3D existence is. I just don't know.
Well, I appreciate that. I get guests on sometimes, and I could tell the real from the fake, and because the real ones, if they don't know, they say they don't know. They don't try to make up some backstory to cover it up, and I do appreciate that. We do have a call. We've got 441 area code. You are on Late Night in the Midlands. First name and where you're calling from, please.
Hello, Michael. This is Mark from Scotland. I called a few nights ago.
Oh, welcome aboard.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
But what it was is I have a bit of trouble with the whole flat Earth issue. And one thing that someone says to me was, Well, if the world is flat, then why is it in the northern hemisphere when you run water down a plug, it goes clockwise, and if you're on the southern hemisphere, it's anti-clockwise? Just something someone came up with, and I thought about it, and does that make any sense?
Yeah, cheers to Scotland, first of all. I've been watching some videos from your part of the world, and I see a lot of people standing up for their rights there, so good on Scotland.
Yep.
The truth is, sir, that I can't answer that. I don't get into the flat earth argument for the simple reason that it takes so much time to film and do the things that I do, that if I was going to, it's a bit like serving two masters, isn't it? If you want to serve two masters,
Yeah.
both of them are going to get cheated. I think what the flat earth movement is doing, at least the people that are honest and serious about it, and not the disinformation kind of agents that have invaded it, are bringing a lot of good information. But I've thought about the question you just asked, and I don't have a good answer.
Because, I mean, when you were talking about the sun there, it's like as you're saying, it's not real. Is that what you're saying? It's not really there?
No, it's
Because
there. We can see it. It's a light. It's a light.
But why is there? If it's just a light, why are we getting so much heat from it? That's the photosynthesis and things like that.
Any source of light is energy, right? And any source of energy can emit heat. I mean, I think that's the closest I can come, but I do not buy for a second that it is a nuclear furnace.
Right. Okay. It's just something, those two issues, and because every time if I'm researching something and something comes up about the flat Earth, it's something that I find very difficult to get my head around. I think, well, it can't be. It's automatically we're round. All the planets are round, and it just it's a bit crazy in my mind to accept that.
Well, let me point something out. For a long time, as I filmed the supposed planets, Jupiter, Mars, other things, I have these things posted on my channel. I used to think to myself, why are the inner planets, or the supposed inner planets, rocky, and why are the supposed outer planets gas, we're told? And it dawned on me one day that those planets that are supposedly gas, every time you look at them, they're going to be a little bit different. But the inverse of that is, every time we look at Mars, it needs to be pretty close to the same thing we saw last time we looked, right? It's a rock. But the truth is, I have a video posted on this. There were people like Percival Lowell and another guy called Giovanni something back in the day, before Pluto was discovered, that were claiming there were channels on Mars. And the reason they thought this is because this is what they observed, and one of them was using, I think, a 27-inch telescope, which I looked through. It's in Arizona. And the other guy, another big scope. Yet this is not what we see today. So how is it that these people who were noted astronomers were saying, I see channels or canals or whatever the argument wants to be, and drawing these pictures? The Air Force even made a Google overlay for this, I believe, in the 60s, using the canals. And if you look at old movies, the canals are in those movies when you see stuff relating to Mars. But fast forward to our times, we don't see any of that. So you see, it's a construct, and while we still do have some things we can look back to confirm that we're looking at a construct, as the internet takes over, it's going to get harder to do that, my brother, because when everything becomes digital, a push of a button could change the word mass murderer to a man, you see. So I kind of wandered off topic, but...
Yeah, but I mean, with the moon, though, I mean, I've always thought that the possibility, as we've discussed in the show before, as it being an ancient spaceship or something like that. I mean, some people, I say to some of my friends, the moon might be a spaceship, and they look at me as if I'm crazy, which is,
if the moon were a spaceship, then it would be subject to the one thing we know from having lived lives. The one thing that is guaranteed from any living thing is change, right? Anything that is alive understands that there is one immutable law, change. Change will occur. Now, we look at the moon, we don't see this change. If it was a metal spaceship or some kind of a mocked-up solid object, Why isn't it changing?
Mm. I suppose, yeah, I mean, that's true. It hasn't at all. But does this all mean that possibly that, as you said, it's a construct, that maybe that there's no extraterrestrial life out there? Does that screw all that up?
Most of my life, I have found it very hard to imagine that us here in this world are the only living things. Having said that, I've never seen anything convincing, filmed anything, logically deduced anything that guarantees me there is aliens or something other. And so for now, that's where I'm at. But we're living in the high-def age. You know, where is all the high-def video of space, of all these amazing things? I did clips on the supposed comet landing that was a big play-acted movie for everybody. I did clips on the Pluto mission, which is nothing more than Masonic kind of kowtowing to the underworld god called Pluto, and it is directly related to Disney because, as everyone knows, the dog Disney, called the Pluto dog that Disney invented, was invented in the same year that we supposedly discovered Pluto, and yet there's supposed to be no relation there. But at the end of the day, that's a god of the underworld, and it's all Masonically coded in the same way so much of our media is.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thanks again, Michael, for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, no. Cheers to Scotland.
Yeah, thank you, and you take care, the both of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, my friend. I appreciate the call all the way from Scotland. And, folks, after the break, we're going to take more calls, so...
in the initial kind of phase where I was trying to describe it in public, I had said that it was masking something over the top of a real moon, but I have moved on. Change is the constant, and you learn as you go along. I'm not saying it's cloaking anything. I'm saying it's a facade up there that emits its own light, and nobody could set a boot on it if they even wanted to, probably. That's my view.
I see. And for the questions that people have thrown me in the chat room, please reapply them, because I had on that computer, unfortunately it crashed over there. So I had to reboot it up, and so your questions are gone over there, but I still have a bunch of them here via email. Shirley in New York, she says the moon is still visible when the sun is out, right? She says your guests must know what happens to a hologram if it gets direct sunlight. I mean...
So again, I walked away from using the word hologram for exactly that reason. The problem is we lack a language to describe what I believe we were looking at. Whatever it is, I can't tell you who put it there. I can't tell you how long it's been there. The truth about history is that most of us can see back maybe through a great-great-grandparent or something like that. If you look at it logically, anything you choose to believe beyond that is really, you're just kind of choosing to believe it. There's no basis for the belief. You're doing it because you've been told things. This is history. They've told you this a lot. It's in textbooks. You've seen it a lot. So I know I kind of wandered there, but the truth is we have no way to know a valid history beyond maybe a great or a great-great-grandparent. And even some of the supposed figures in history have told us this, like Napoleon, if there was such a man. What was his statement? History is a lie agreed upon, you see.
Right. All right. And the next question here comes from Wookiee in Space. The government, he says, always needs money for its secret projects. So setting up NASA and the possibility of space travel to the moon opened up a lot of checkbooks. Your guest thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's right. I think that you're looking at a situation that we can kind of document in a weird way that demonstrates that NASA defrauded this country out of a massive amount of money. They said they were going to the moon. They did not go to the moon. And the numbers that we were given on the tail of that mission are staggering in 1960s and 70s cash.
I see. All right. And another one here. This is Mario, and he is in Denver. The government takes billions of dollars worth of taxes from the American public and continues to brainwash the public into thinking we'll discover more about the moon and other planets in space. Your guest is correct. It's all a fraud. So.
That's right. I mean, people who are logical in thinking don't really need a telescope to just go out and logically look at things. I saw not too long ago NASA was trying to get people to donate money to, curate one of the original Apollo spacesuits or some old spacesuit. And on the face of it, that's ridiculous. We paid these people apparently gazillions of dollars. So why is the public being asked to donate money? And what it is, it's a bellwether. If they ask and the public immediately ponies up that money, they know that their lie is alive and well. But I would point out, not too long ago, the cover of National Geographic was about people like me who understand the moon landing was a fraud, and they used the cover of that multinational publication, one of the last magazines that's got any circulation, to belittle the people who are challenging the party line on NASA. So your caller from Denver is spot on.
Okay, we've got a question from our chat here. This one comes from Bear, and he says, Joe, I had you down as Joe Smith because I didn't have a real name at first, so he's calling you Joe. Joe stated he has seen UFOs on the moon. Could they be the same? Oh, let's see here. I don't think you said the moon, though, did you? He says,
no.
Could they be the same ones as seen on Earth? He says, if so, wouldn't that mean the Van Allen's belt is passable? Different technology considered, he says.
Well, I've never claimed that I've seen a UFO on the moon, though some of my very old clips, I could see how someone might listen to that and be led to think that. I don't believe I've ever shot anything anywhere near the moon. First off, if we accept NASA's distance for the moon, it's roughly 250,000 miles. So to shoot anything with a 12-inch scope or an 11-inch scope, it's going to be a pixel at best, and it would have to be pretty big to be a pixel. But my point would be, at this point, we're beginning to get to the point, I think, where we're going to be able to demonstrate that the moon's not nearly as far as we've been told. And again, it's not a rock in space. No one can go there. There's no reason. It's not a thing you could orbit or stand on, in my view. So, for a UFO to go there as a destination, it doesn't make logical sense.
I see. And 563, he keeps trying to call in. He gets on the board and he falls off. But we've got Ira. Ira, you're next because the last caller dropped off. So welcome aboard.
Hey there. I think it's Caesar that's trying to call in.
Oh.
This has definitely been an interesting conversation so far. As you can tell, I'm having issues tonight with my voice. But anyways, I wanted to call in and ask, what do you think about the information that came out like years ago, like I think it was late 1800s was when it really started getting a lot of play in the media, of where they were seeing storms and actually like almost like lightning storm or something like that happening on Mars. Where do you find a correlation with what you're saying as far as things like that goes?
Well, I mean, what we can know for certain is that we're looking at lights. Mars is a funny planet to look at. It's very difficult. Like when you look at Jupiter, which is bigger but further away, it's a much easier task to get a decent focused image of it for some reason. It is supposedly bigger. But Mars is so difficult, but the times that I have been able to zero in on it, maybe it's a bit like the lunar wave. I mean, maybe there's some kind of a malfunction in the system we're seeing, or maybe there's something going on with a light. Maybe it literally is nothing more than a light. I mean, I'm not going to accept any description that NASA has given, and when you do that, you have to throw out that there are these round globular things out there spinning and orbiting something. You have to throw all that out. I mean, look at it this way. If you were in a court of law as an American citizen and you were caught lying, everything you had said to that point would be thrown out as not trustable and inadmissible, and nothing going forward would be accepted. So if you as a person hold NASA and your government to the same standard, what it basically tells you is we are now babes in the woods starting from scratch, but all those definitions, all those supposed images and video and all the crap they have handed us, that gets chucked out, man. It gets thrown in the fireplace, and we start over. And if we know that they were lying, there must have been a purpose for the lie. And when we look back through Hollywood and Star Trek and all these other things that kind of echo what we're expected to believe is correct, you come to the conclusion that you can't accept that there are a thing called planets in the way that they have been described to us.
Well, I can definitely get behind you with that thought. I know for me, I have actually on my shows talked about a lot about the fact that I think the universe itself is a hologram as well at the base core of things. You know, kind of like I always put it into computer terms, you know, because I'm a big computer geek. So I kind of put it in computer terms, like we're basically in a simulation program, sort of like The Sims would be, just a very elaborate version of something along those lines. You know, we're just not aware of it because we're actually the users that are so involved in the game, basically. One thing I wanted to ask about, or like state, was I heard you referring earlier to the Pluto Disney combination, and what I thought was really interesting was when they put the pictures out of Pluto. I actually put a couple of them into the chat room for people to see. When they came out with the images of Pluto, it really does look like Pluto's head at the right. Southern pole of Pluto, and you know there have been people that have drawn over it looking like Pluto. It looks exactly like it. It's very strange, you know. So maybe that's kind of like that little glitch there.
Yeah, well, this is the kind of thing that goes on. This kind of secret society encoding from people who do understand what the truth is. You're being poked in the eye. You're being slapped in the face. You're nothing more than a monkey, chattel. You're being traded. Your birth certificate is ensuring that you are being traded for money as chattel. Your life's value is being traded on a stock market somewhere, kind of. The point I would make is it's no different than the false flags that we see almost every damn day down here. Let's take Sandy Hook as an example. Sandy Hook had this supposed coroner, or no, what's the name for the guy who does the autopsies? I can't remember what the name is, but the gentleman who was supposed to be doing the autopsies on all these murdered children, his name was Carver, as he stood up there and told everyone that he had just carved up these children,
I noticed
and
that too.
it was a complete, it was a put-on. So you're being poked in the eye, and why that happens is really an arguable point, but I think you point out a very accurate thing. This is the kind of insult that comes along with the injury.
Sure, you see that a lot with the different false flag events that happen as well. That the names of the people that are involved are similar along those lines. You know, there was one Hunter and that kind of thing. It's like
exactly.
Okay, I see where you're going with it, and I agree.
Coded. There's also a numerically coded value, the date, play. I mean, it's all.
Yes.
It's such an elaborate system that it is almost difficult to fathom that human minds constructed it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like when the Baltimore riots first started up. One of the things that I noticed and talked about on my show was the timing of things was exactly correlative to the beginnings of the Civil War. You know, the whole actions that took place there. It was an exact duplicate. It was like the cycle of time literally repeated itself.
What was the Civil War about? You know, trying to get black people their rights, and then we get up to Ferguson, and here it is,
all
the race baiting,
replay.
The constant race baiting. It's to sow the seeds of discord. You know, divide and conquer.
Yeah, it's all a replay of the system, basically.
Yes, it's a funny thing. I remember when I was a kid, my father was a college professor. He's a PhD, and at some point he told me there was a finite number of storylines. And while you can go online these days and get anything from 2 to 3 to 36 to 12, he had told me at the time there was something like 12 storylines. And as a kid, I thought, how can that be? And he told me, well, if you invent the 13th, you'd be famous.
Yep.
Excuse me. And what we actually see in these false flags is, you're exactly right. It's like the old 12-inch LP on the record player spinning. It's the same thing over and over and over with a different cast and a different set of costumes.
It is, absolutely, and you're right. I mean, it's like the whole "Man with a Thousand Faces"
Exactly.
storyline. It's all a replay. It follows that same formulaic system. And if you start
if it
if you
ain't
start
broke, don't
understanding
fix
it,
it.
right? Exactly. And if you can start understanding it, you can actually start to see through the system a little bit. One of the things that I ran across years ago in relation to what you're speaking about, I think it kind of maybe even adds a little bit into what you're trying to put across to everybody here. Which, I mean, it's all interesting concepts. I love thinking about this kind of stuff. So, I ran across information years ago about a group of scientists who were, or well, as mathematicians, they were working with string theory, and they were trying to come up with some new formulas as far as string theory goes. One of the things that they ran across was this set of formulas that were really weirdly associated with a code that we currently use as an error correction code on the internet. It literally, in the fabric of the universe, according to string theory, there is an error correction code that was actually created in about 1986 to be used on the internet to ensure that the data that is being sent in packets across the internet is being received in the correct manner. So an error correction bit of software is written into the universe as the fabric of it.
Well, it's a funny thing. I'm following you. I actually have a degree in internet technology, so I understood everything you just said. When you begin to go at it in this way, then in my mind anyhow, it starts to be, so we have this group of kind of psychopathic rulers that are probably royal, doing all this coding and driving these false events and controlling society. But above them, there seems to be a level of code that they're somehow tapping. I mean, it goes on and on. And the truth is, I don't really address that a lot because, again, I really don't want to kind of inject fantasy, say one thing is fantasy, and then make up a new one that everyone's going to kind of say, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I can totally get behind you with that. I understand your position with that, and I would agree with you if I was in that same circumstance as well. I can totally respect that. So definitely, I'm kind of the same way myself. One other question then, and I'll let you guys go, is you were speaking earlier about the sun being a light. What do you think as far as the like the electric universe type of theories are concerned?
I don't care for it or buy into it one bit. What I find in the electric universe theory is it's simply been created to repackage the kind of Star Trek NASA view of what is out there, what space is, except now it's electric. And I don't think that's, I mean, basically it's built on the foundation that, yep, these things are orbiting in the way we've been told. They're round, they're rocks, they're gas. There's galaxies. That star you're looking at, by the way, is a gazillion light years away. I don't accept any of that. It's insanity to do so. We know that these people who created these definitions are frickin' liars, psychopathic liars. I mean, they get paid to lie. And so to accept anything from them is a huge mistake in my view. I mean, you sound like a guy who's written some computer code. If you had a foundation of erroneous computer code, would you just say, okay, I'll leave it there and build on top of it? Hell no.
No.
You throw that erroneous code out and start writing your own new code. And that's where we are, man. We got to write our own code now because everything we've been handed is tainted by the powers that be. And so the electric universe model, to me, seems almost like an inside game to go back, repackage slightly to get the conspiracy people and others reinvigorated, and then get them to buy back into, the description of space and planets that we've been handed.
I like that idea. Yeah. Very cool. This has definitely been an interesting conversation. I'm really glad that you were here tonight and we're able to hook up with Michael. And Michael, thanks for having him here. Actually, one other thing I would like to add, maybe I can get your thoughts on this too, sure. And then I'll let you guys go. Okay. See what happens. I call in and I start gabbing. Sometimes when I speak about things, I look at how scientists they put forward the idea that everything is matter, and out of the matter comes the mind. So we've got matter, the material universe. Everything is this physical thing, and out of that was built the brain that we think with, and out of that brain comes the consciousness. But for me, I look at things opposite. I think that consciousness is first. Out of that consciousness comes this droplet of a brain that we, kind of interact then with this matter that's created out of the consciousness. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's pretty clear clear. I spent a lot of time in my life reading and researching. I've done Christianity back to its original languages. I've done Tibetan Buddhism for a heck of a long time, some Theravedian, just a lot of kind of Sanskrit text, Bhagavad Gita. I think it's pretty clear that in this 3D reality we have a brain that lets us do things, but I think it's also completely demonstrably clear that our consciousness and our awareness can be separated from the 3D reality, and it's still conscious and aware. And so what we find in science is that the system, it's a bit like, let's back up a minute. Let's go at it this way. You go through school, and this is my view, this is my kind of logicked out view of what we're looking at to try to explain it to other people. When you go through school, what you're being taught is how to operate within a system. You're being taught nothing about the system. There are people, presumably royals or other special people, whoever the heck they are. I never use the word Illuminati because it doesn't mean anything. But there are groups of people who went to Hogwarts and got told about the system and presumably about what this place really is. And, things about the system that the rest of us are just kind of taught to work within. I think science, and I'm not an anti-science guy. I grew up in a scholastic household, but one of the problems with science is exactly what we're talking about. There is so much evidence that demonstrates a human being can be outside their body and still have a consciousness. I mean, it's done all the time in lucid dreaming. There's plenty of people who did meditation very deeply who can demonstrate this, even alive right now, but yet science will not back it. And to take that a step further, recently I watched a NOVA where they were going to announce the God particle. It was the most painful piece of kind of footage for science that I've ever seen in my life. If you can watch that God particle, the Higgs boson announcement, and walk away not understanding you've just been defrauded, I don't think we can have a conversation on any level, because that is the problem with science now. I mean, there's articles in the paper talking about the death of American universities, and the simple truth is all these things are funded. The people who fund them control them, and they do what they will, and the state of physics is in complete shambles because of this truth, and the Higgs boson show demonstrated it. And I know I wandered a bit there, but I'm trying to demonstrate how the system that we live in, while I've got to respect science, it gave me a car and an air conditioner for crying out loud, at the same time what has happened to science is preventing us from reaching the next rung on the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. You could almost look at it like a video game analogy. When you play a video game, you're given a tutorial of how to play the game, but you're not taught how to use the computer system that you're using the video game on, for instance.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great.
If you knew that going into the game, you'd be the best video game player from day one, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
You'd have a huge advantage.
which
would be
maybe,
the royal guy of that game.
Right, which maybe is one of the things, as far as the people that you were just speaking about, that can do, some really incredible things. Like there was just an article about a girl a couple of days ago who saved her father when his car dropped on top of him. She lifted up the car, or the truck, literally with some kind of weird superhuman strength. That doesn't happen in the standard format that we see in the universe that we are handed. They say that's impossible, but it happened. So how is that possible? Unless she literally kind of glitched herself out of the matrix for a moment, altered the reality around her, and said, I can do this, because she had no concept of being able to do otherwise.
Or
is that moment
story?
of fear?
Yeah, I mean, you can go a few ways. Is it a made-up story just to put more... if you look at a basic computer tenet, bad data in, bad data out, that is the life of everyone listening to us right now. That is the entirety of their lives, with very few exceptions. We have been handed so much bad information that every decision we have made in our lives has been based on bad information. Now, the people who had good information can take advantage of that situation very, very easily. You could relate it to money or any number of things, right? In the case of the girl lifting off the car, I just simply won't accept it. Until I see a little girl lift a car, that's not something I'm prepared to accept. There's tons of stories of it, but if you want to come at this whole kind of idea we're talking about now, look at it in a different way and just do a mind experiment. so many people see with the flat Earth people questioning the world we're in, and I have said our world is intentionally misdescribed, and they're finding all these evidences or trying to find these proofs. But here's a mind experiment for anyone listening. When this is done and you're done listening and you're alone in a quiet area, shut your eyes and imagine yourself on a spinning ball where anything in orbit around that ball is going 17,000 miles an hour, we are told, and you are standing on that ball. Okay, now imagine that that ball is whipping around the sun. Now imagine that that sun is whipping around a galaxy. Now imagine that that galaxy is whipping around something else, because in that model, everything is orbiting something, okay? Now, when you're done doing that thought experiment, think about just standing on a flat plane that's not spinning or moving. And between those two thought experiments, which one allowed you to feel stable and which one made you feel off balance? And though that is nothing more than a thought experiment, it is enough to get you thinking about the things we should be questioning.
Definitely well understand. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it, and this has really been interesting.
All right, Ira, thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
Cheers, Ira.
All right, next up we've got, I think this is, we've got 563 area code. Would this be Caesar? Or is this Mario? 563 area code. You're on Late Night in the Midlands. You might have yourself muted. Try unmuting yourself. 563. Last time. Can you hear us?
Hello?
There you are.
Oh, sorry about that.
Welcome aboard.
Patience pays off.
Okay, thank you. Crow, I subscribe to your channel on YouTube, and I listen to a lot of your videos. I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
I believe in your videos you say that nothing escapes low Earth orbit. So, by the same token, do you believe astronauts have not landed on the moon and also not on Mars? Because there are things on, I believe, on both of them, especially on Mars, that do not look like they are naturally made formations.
Okay, I'll go with that. Are you ready for me to answer?
Yes, and please try. Well, go ahead, Crow. Go ahead.
Okay, so first, yes, you are correct. I've stated nothing, man or machine, goes above low Earth orbit. There seems to be some kind of a hard and fast boundary that cannot be penetrated. To answer your question, I back in the day I was looking at what is it, Sardonia or whatever it's called, on Mars where the face was. I was interested in Hoagland's work. I know where you're coming from. I've seen those images. But here's the problem. The images you're looking at were handed to you by psychopathic liars that lie for a living. And to demonstrate what I'm saying to you, China is currently telling you they're on the moon. And yet, not too long ago, China got caught red-handed passing off what they told us were Chinese astronauts in space, but they got busted because they filmed it in a pool because there was bubbles all over the footage. This goes on all the time. I would further point out some little things that you can do to look at what a space agency, doesn't matter what country, is, or what space agencies are, regardless of country. Every space agency in this world has the vector symbol in their logo. It's the club they're in. They all push the same lie. In the same way China is lying to us, saying they've got a rover on the moon right now, NASA lied to us in the 60s, saying they put men on the moon. If you remember back then, more logic will tell you, how is it that Russia spent all that treasure and blood to get to the moon in a race with us, and yet when we put the first boot down, Russia said, okay, they beat us, we're done, we put all this effort in, we don't need to go now. If you logically look at what you're being handed, you can quickly come to the conclusion that it's all just malarkey. So did I answer that for you?
Yes, you did. I believe you because when I visited NASA Space Canaveral, someone there told me that it was nothing but a bunch of strings and a I believe them. What do you think about stargates or portals or things like the Ark, higher technology that might have the ability to go ahead and transport human beings or aliens from here, from this Earth, from Tierra Firma, to these other so-called planets? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I don't accept that there's other planets. We don't have any basis to accept that. All we have to go on is what we can see with our own eyes and what psychopathic liars have given us, and I don't accept what psychopathic liars have given us. Now, to get back to that, I think you ask a very interesting question. The Norway spiral, my wife witnessed the one that just happened in San Diego. I'm often on the Higher Side Chats, and Greg Carlwood, who runs the Higher Side Chats, witnessed part of that and shot me some images very near to when it happened. Unfortunately, I didn't witness it, but I think there is something very interesting going on there, and I think that the meme that we see in media, the Legos is doing it. The first Avengers movie where the portal opens and Iron Man's taking the missile through. Well, of course, we were told that was a missile launch out there. And yet we see that there seems to be some kind of a portalish idea going on there. While I can't tell you what's going on, I think it's absolutely something to look at, to correlate, to backtrack through time, the examples we have, because there is an absolute portal meme in movie, media, and news right now.
Okay, I gotcha. My next question would be, I think I heard you mention, Crow, in some of your YouTube channels that you believe there is no ISS space station, the International Space Station.
That's correct.
If that is the case, then what in the world are we looking at when NASA shows us pictures of the ISS and they show us pictures of space and the stars in the background? What are we looking at? You're looking
at fraud. Let's look at this logically. First of all, I've stated that I believe these people are psychopathic liars. I believe that their mission from their inception was to ensure that the people who live here know nothing about the blue sky above their heads. That is their mission, in my view. Now, let's look at this logically. First off, if you went to go see something like the movie Gravity in the movies, if you were shown that and not told that it was a fictitious movie, you would not be able to tell that every inch of that was not shot in space, correct? So
Correct.
When you see these things that NASA produces, there's really no way to demonstrate that they're real or they're not. But what you can know for a fact is these people have lied to you and that they are at their base a military organization. So when you know these things, you realize you can no longer accept information. When you no longer accept information, you begin to think on your own, and you do this over the period of about a year, the way you think will change, and you will be able to problem solve and spot fraud much more easily. In terms of the International Space Station, I think you asked me, what are we looking at? You're looking at a light. I can film a light in the sky any night of the week. Any night of the week. But I could even make this a little more complicated. I have stated for the record that I do not believe satellites exist in the way they've been described. Getting back to the ISS, there has been just endless videos demonstrating the problems with the weightless environments shot on the Vomit Comet, because they can figure this out partially by the length of clips and how long you can remain weightless in a plane doing a parabolic arc. The one shot with the kind of kung fu wire system. The one shot where the women were suspended upside down, you can see it in their faces, to get their hair to be up. When they got caught doing that, they started perming their hair straight up so it was like concrete. They're in a weightless environment, their hair is not moving. It goes on and on and on, and then we can always loop back to the Chinese astronauts filming in a pool and trying to pass it off in space. What I'm getting at here is we know people have lied to us. We can no longer accept stuff from them. So what it comes down to now is challenging what they are giving us. And when you get your mind clear enough to do that, you'll just poke endless holes in what you're being handed.
Okay, wow. Wow, you're really blowing my mind here. How about there are some people that believe that the moon is like a transmitting relay station, and the Saturn is the big mainframe. What are your ideas on that, Crow?
Well, again, in my view, Mars is a light. Jupiter's a light until it's something
Okay.
else. I don't accept any other definition. But the first part of your question is very interesting because it has been considered that the lunar wave that I filmed, and has been filmed by I think 9 other people 12 or 16 times or something like that, I can never keep track, could be some kind of a download. Now, if we consider that we've been told the moon controls all these things by science, tides, all these other things, and by the way, some of the people who tried to correlate the tides to the moon made statements like it is the place where reason goes to die. So even though science still spouts this, there's documented that people who tried to correlate it perfectly realized that you couldn't do it. But to get back to the moon as a control center, early on, as I was trying to describe the lunar wave, I considered that it was hiding a control center and that there was downloads. An interesting thought experiment to do with the moon that anyone can do even if they don't have equipment. From now on, whenever you're watching a movie, television, any form of media that presents the moon to you, pay very close attention to the words that are said before it happens, as it happens, and after it happens, and then strip away all context. In other words, if a joke was told going into showing you the moon, strip away the fact that it was a joke. Just latch onto the words because words have meaning. Words have meaning. I cannot say this enough times in my life. And you will quickly discover that what you're being presented with demonstrates that the moon is related to death, insanity, and sleep. So in my view, it's not far-fetched to consider that there's some kind of a downloader going on. But the point is, I can't really demonstrate that, and I'm not going to create another fantasy trying to.
Okay. Crow, just one last question.
Go ahead.
Shoot.
Michael, can I ask him one last
Oh,
question?
yeah, absolutely. Listen, I never rush the callers off, not unless they're being idiots, and you're not being an idiot.
Great.
So,
Great. My last question is on a more personal note because I have heard you discuss this on your YouTube channel, Crow.
Yeah.
I had a traumatic experience as a child, but I wrote it off as a dream, where I was in a department store called Woolworth, and there were cages with a bunch of animals, and these spiders came out. Needless to say, it attacked my brother. My dad did nothing because he was taking money from a Freemasonry filth man or whatever. But either way, I had to go to my brother to save him. In my dream, it was a dream to me. I had to save him because the spider jumped on his face, and I had to stab the spider off my brother's face. I think I heard you mention something about a spider race. Can you please elaborate on what you know about the spider race?
So I should be perfectly clear about what you're referencing. There was a Russian researcher who I became aware of, and the way that happened is posted on my channel. His name is Hattie Bob, to the best of our knowledge, which is a nickname for Katim Alexander. This gentleman makes all kinds of claims about a spider race and other things. The reason I became interested in his research was because he's the first and to date the only person who correlated 3 things about the lunar wave that I had come to consider were true. And not only did he correlate with these 3 things about the lunar wave, he more precisely defined them. Now, he also goes on to talk about spider races and all these other things. You should know, for the record, that one video, or maybe 3 or 4 videos ago, I stated in an interview I did about Hattie Bob that I would no longer cover this material. The reason is because it was becoming a bit of a sideshow, and too many people were buying into it as a new fantasy to believe in. And while I think the lunar wave stuff that correlated is very interesting, I'm not prepared to have people go set up the Church of Arachnids tomorrow. And so I have, until more is known, walked away from that material because I don't think it's helpful. Very interesting, very entertaining, but maybe not so helpful.
okay.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Crow,
Cheers.
It was a pleasure speaking with you. I find your YouTube videos fascinating, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you
you.
very much for the call, Mario. I appreciate it. And, Crow, we've got one more break coming up here, and then I want to give you the floor to get out anything that you like. But before we do that, I've got a few more questions. I guess they're questions from people. Len is in Massachusetts. He's listening on 87.5. He said, science disproves the ability of the moon to stay in Earth's orbit. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, there's a thinking individual, and again, I'm not an anti-science guy, but I have real problems with what science is, because what he has said may well be true, though I'm not 100% of what he's referencing. I mean, NASA itself has guys on their staff that said the moon has to be hollow, that it's 1% of the Earth's mass. If we look at these things, this thing's 1% of Earth's mass that's controlling all the tides. Wouldn't the sun have a much larger effect if the moon was only 1% of Earth's mass and hollow? But what he's saying, I think, probably has merit. I don't know what he's referencing, but at the end of the day, science has real problems, because the age we're in now is about individuals kicking down boundaries, and they're not going to be held by the laws, rules, and, you know, supposed methods of science anymore. They're going to throw that out the window, and that's going to make a lot of people upset, but you've got to do what you've got to do to move forward.
I hear that. And, well, let's go one more here. Stu he's in Massachusetts also. Yeah, he's probably hanging out with the other guy here. Let's see. There is no way a moon lander denier could say they still don't believe the moon landing happened. He says, look at the way the dust is flying up from the LM driving around the moon. You would never see that kind of dust movement on Earth. And I know this question, this is kind of for you, Crow, but I'll say this: you underestimate what they can do. That's all I could say.
Well, I mean, look at the movie Gravity again. If you took a person who was unaware of famous actors or Hollywood or any of that and showed them that movie, they would believe wholeheartedly every inch of that was shot in space. It's that good. And the idea that back in the day they did not have the ability to film things that could easily fool us is just, it's foolishness. If you choose to trust psychopathic liars, that is your privilege. I don't agree with it.
Well said. All right, hang on with us one more time, Crow.
But NASA lied. You can't trust that damn NASA. There's all this ancient alien stuff up there. But here's a funny thing. My good friend Greg Carlwood, who runs THC, very good podcast, tried to get him on, couldn't, and said it's probably because I'm not big enough. But he stated that when you look at these guys, they're only ever willing to talk to this very narrow sliver of a topic, which is what they cover. And in my view, the information you get from Hoagland, who incidentally, I was interviewed by Time Magazine on the web, and then they wanted to do a print version later, and it was all around me calling the Pluto mission hoax. When I said that, it blew up like wildfire. Gizmodo picked it up, the Daily Mail in the UK, Newsweek came, and actually Newsweek was very fair to me, which was surprising. A guy named Max, forgot his last name, Kreutz or something like that, sorry Max, was very polite and very fair to me. Got a quote from Hoagland while I was actually on a road trip in August about who he thought I was, and Hoagland stated that I was a NASA operative. And to me, that was a badge of honor, because I've never worked for NASA, and he has. But at the very base of everything, what that kind of work does is pushes the idea that astronauts stood on the moon. That's why it's there. That's what it's for. And Greg Carlwood's observation that they're only willing to talk about a very narrow sliver of things, he's right. That's what they do. And there was a time when I read, Dark Mission, and I had a guy named Mike Barra on my YouTube channel, and when I finally asked him if it was the same guy, he disappeared. I have no respect for that kind of work. I think it's misinformation at best.
It absolutely is. I've had personal dealings with Richard Hoagland myself, where he
As have I.
Yeah, he's told me that if I had a certain guest on my show, that he would never come on my show, and I could proudly say to this day, Richard Hoagland's never been on my show. So yeah, and that's what they ask first. How many listeners do you?
Oh, sorry, we're stepping on each other.
Oh no,
there.
go ahead.
He had a producer contact me to do an interview after he had called me a NASA operative in print in Newsweek. And I said to the producer, sure, I'll go do Hoagland's show as long as you tell me it's not a hit piece, a hit job. And I said, but last I heard, he was calling me an asset operative. And the funny thing was, is that producer claimed he was unaware of that. And he said, well, I'll go confirm that it's not going to be a hit job with Richard. And he never got back to me, you see. So it's this kind of thing. These people are the old guard, and the bricks in their wall are being readily yanked out. So it's time for the new guys to come in and hopefully spread something that's a little more valuable.
Yeah, and a little more useful. Because these guys really, they're all about the money. I mean, that's all they have ever, the money, and you could pay them to suffocate their mothers with pillows, and they'd do it if you paid them enough.
Probably. I mean, how many times has Hoagland been on George Norrie's show, I've never been on Norrie's show. How can that be? I'm the discoverer of the lunar wave. How is it that my work is not interesting enough for Norrie to ever even spend 20 or 30 minutes on me? I mean, even Ground Zero did a show with me, but you can tell what's going on. It's a little club. It's a little control. They're bought and paid for. It's that simple.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Hoagland had a little fallout with Norrie because his main squeeze, Art Bell, came back, so he ran over to Art Bell so he can have his own show and make a ton of money. And then Art Bell, of course, walked out again. He makes a bunch of money, and then he steps out for a little while, and then he comes back. That's how these guys are. They got to check in with their handlers. But we've got another call here, so we'll take one more. 909 area code. You're on Late Night in the Midlands. First name and where you're calling from.
Michael Sugarloaf.
Hey, welcome aboard.
Hey, so I was actually doing work, and I wanted to comment. What you guys are saying about the whole sort of old boy network kind of thing going on, it's the exact reason that I don't listen to those guys anymore, and I can't. It's horrible. I mean, it really is.
For you.
Yeah, well, listening to L&M, and I'm not trying to do a plug or whatever. I'm not paid for it. Whatever. I'm a late nighter, but I'm not trying to do a plug. But what it reminds me of is sitting around, having a cocktail, having some food, and talking to people in your living room. That's what it reminds me of. I mean, I loved the Blue Collar show last night. I re-listened to it in the archives, and he was fumbling like nothing else. But you know what? I don't care. It's knowledge, and however you deliver it, it's not overproduced, and that's the important thing to me.
Well, yeah, to me too, and that's how I intend it. When I bring guests on, I expect it to be. I try to set it up where it will be like two friends sitting in the living room having a conversation. I don't like doing interviews. I like having conversations because it's through conversations that you learn. And interviews, there's a set agenda there, really, I think. You got all these questions. These guys like George Norrie and that. I know for a fact with Norrie that if the guest doesn't give him the questions ahead of time, that he won't have you on. I mean, he wants you. I know somebody who used to be a regular on my show, Helene Olsen, and she was told by him that she needed to send the questions into him, or he couldn't have her on that night. So that's how he rolls. So these guys, they come in, they punch in their card, they sit down, and they roll out the sheets of paper that tell them what they're going to do that night.
Well, I actually did Ground Zero, and while I was treated very fairly there, it is like that, but maybe less so than the real big boys that you're referring to. But you see, when I came here, not only did I not know what you were going to ask me, there were no questions handed from me to you or from you to me. I kind of suspected it would probably be the lunar wave because that's usually the first thing people want to ask me. Point is, no one has told me I can't say anything. Nothing has been restricted. It's not a produced show, and that's a valuable thing. I'm going to be launching a podcast soon for the simple reason that I want to be able to do for my followers what we are doing here, and YouTube no longer allows that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
wow, that's interesting.
Well, we're always looking to add new stuff here, so, keep us in mind maybe.
All right. Anyway, guys, sorry. Let you go.
All right. Have a good one,
Cheers,
and thank you for the
All
call.
right.
All right. And Crow, what I'd like to do is give you the floor to get out anything that you'd like, whatever it might be, and take your time. But I do this with all my guests. I give them, roll out the red carpet there, and whatever's on your mind that we might not have touched on, or anything you want to plug, any appearances you got coming up, whatever it might be, go right ahead.
Well, the main thing that I have coming up is I'm going to be launching a podcast, which I will announce on my YouTube channel. The reason I'm doing it is twofold. YouTube has become a place where you live in fear, where the content you post, you don't know if someone's going to arbitrarily report you, put a copyright claim on you, or any number of things, or whether talking about 9/11 or Sandy Hook will cause trouble for your channel after you've spent thousands of hours building a channel and putting footage that took you thousands of hours to film. Having said that, on the podcast, I will have my own comments section for people who want to have a serious adult conversation like we've done here, where anyone can ask or say anything and there won't be a troll in sight because I will control it. And if people want to be rude or problematic, I will boot them. And the rest of us that are still standing can have an adult conversation. So that's the next thing on my horizon. I hope to be up and filming again soon, but I'm on the East Coast now, and I am not accustomed to 20-degree weather, having been in California most of my life, but the filming will resume. Other than that, I don't have a lot to announce. For now, people want to keep tabs on me. They'll just have to do it on YouTube. I would say to people, since I have the floor, there's a critical thing, and I've said this a lot of times. Belief is the enemy of knowing. And I don't say that to insult people's religions. As I stated earlier, I never have and never will state my religious convictions. And I will never talk about religion beyond citing, presumably, old text from Christianity or other religions, because they're old and I think that makes them referenceable. Belief is the enemy of knowing because once you believe in something, you can no longer see detail. You can no longer detect fraud because you've accepted it. Your brain has turned off its ability to analyze, vet, or get to the nitty-gritty of a thing once it is accepted. If you can turn off your ability to accept all the things that are thrown at you every day, and if you have the ability to throw out all the things you have been told in school and all these other places, after about a year, the way you think will begin to change. And learning will become a whole other thing than what you previously thought learning was, where you were taught something, you memorized it, maybe figured out a little bit in the memorization, and that was considered the A. The learning that occurs when you begin to think on your own and stop accepting everyone else's definition or rules and laws of how people should be, should think, should act, what we should accept as real, what we should accept as important, news, media, all that. When you throw that aside and get back to yourself, after about a year, you will learn in a way that is astounding. It's very difficult to explain. It's a bit like intuition, but it's beyond intuition. You will begin to recognize things instantaneously the minute you hear them or see them. It's almost like a smell. And I like to say this to people because we live in an age when the media, movies, TV has been co-opted to the point where it does nothing more than damage all of us every day. And until the worldwide mindset moves away from the influence of these very dark forces, nothing will change. And for those of us who understand what 9/11 was, it would not have been so damaging had as many people who caught on to Sandy Hook caught on to 9/11. And right now on YouTube, they seem to be censoring people talking about 9/11, and some people are claiming it's because another big false flag is coming, and they don't want people remembering the last massive one. I don't know if that's true, but for what it's worth, belief is the enemy of knowing. Learn to think for yourself. Stop accepting all the things that you've been told by outside sources. Even if they're legitimate sources, just set it aside and learn to observe and think for yourself. Other than that, I'm not sure what I would add with this platform you've given me.
Well, Crow, I thank you very much. And as new things develop, I hope you'll keep us posted. I'd be more than happy to have you back on anytime. And again, I thank you for all the work that you do, and we'll keep you linked up on our website. And when you get your new little venue, or your new venue, I should say, off the ground, throw me a link, and I'd be glad to post it for you.
Okay, cool. If you kick me the audio of this, I'd be happy to run it on my channel and point people over, and I would like to thank you and your listeners and the callers for all being polite. I don't care what anyone says or what anyone asks me, as long as they do it like an adult, and everyone here made me very welcome and held a conversation that was above board, and I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we appreciate you, and keep up the good work. And, there's always going to be ridiculers, but that just motivates, doesn't it?
It does. It's just, it's not conducive to communication to have rude people in a room, I guess.
That's right. That's right. My kids are growing, All right. Well, hey, have a great night, my friend, and thank you.
All right. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Non-organic lines. It is a filmed event. If you ask me what it is, which I think you did,
yes,
that's a little tougher, because anything that I can say here now, most people will have trouble with, because they have not done the level of research and put in the time that I have to view the moon and film and put it all together. But for my money, it's some sort of a facade. I no longer accept that the moon is a rock in space, and I no longer accept that anyone could stick a boot on it if they wanted to. Most people that hear that, it'll be a bridge too far, but I make no apology or retraction.
I hear that. Now, I would also say, for anybody who says it's a camera defect, I would say duplicate it. Show it to me again. Like defect.
Well, there's a number of people who have set out to debunk and done 20, 30 videos in a row aimed at debunking it, and I think the best they came up with is an airplane did it. The problem with that is you can see an airplane coming for minutes sometimes. You can hear them, and you get ready to film that, because that's an interesting thing to film when you're sitting out there for hours, maybe filming nothing. And the truth is there is no footage that will replicate what's in the 2012 footage. I believe something like 9 people have filmed it between 12 and 16 times now. The initial filming that I did at the fall equinox of 2012 is the best by far, and there's nothing that even holds a candle, nothing that replicates the energy pulses, the fact that the wave goes out of frame, and just kind of the very distinct, solid, overt.
Is this Mr. Crow?
It is.
Well, welcome aboard. So shall I call you Crow? Is that the name?
That is what folks call me, yes.
All right, great, Crow. Well, listen, I thank you so much for joining me here tonight on Late Night in the Midlands. And I was spending a little time on your YouTube channel, and I got to tell you, it's kind of mind-blowing. So I thought, it really is. I thought maybe we'd start out a little bit of your background. What got you so interested in the deceptions and the lies that are pulled on the people, and then take us through it a little bit.
Well, I suppose most of the stuff you see on my YouTube channel had its kind of beginning in the mid-'90s when I purchased my first 8-inch robotic scope, a very kind of quality scope. At that time, I followed NASA. I subscribed to the telescope magazines. I was out with my film camera trying to replicate Hubble images and that kind of thing. And as time went on, I began to discover that it's all a charade, and that the things we're being presented with are not correct, and they're not correct intentionally. And there was a gap. I went into the Marine Corps for a while, did some other things. I was a roadie for a number of years when I got out of the Marine Corps, setting up bands and that kind of thing. And then I got back into astronomy, and in 2012 it all really changed up. I had been filming, or I had been viewing for a while, but the night of the supermoon in 2012, we spotted some objects.
How one gets there? I mean, how did you finally get to that point where you said, was it the wave that did that for you, or was it other?
Well, to be honest, the wave, when I first shot it, it took me a while to realize, because I kept, thinking this has to be my camera defect somehow. And I'd actually at one point thrown the clip in the garbage on my computer, and that very same night I had an epiphany and restored the clip, because I realized what the camera pan meant, and then it all began to fall in place for me. And then it took me a year and a half to demonstrate that you could replicate filming another lunar wave. But the truth is, part of it is experiential. When you spend thousands of hours looking at something, there's a kind of learning that goes on that is different from the way you learn in school. It's almost intuitive in a way. It's what I call experiential learning. But the problem with experiential learning is you can't really communicate that to someone else. Matter of fact, you flat out can't.
Yeah.
They would either just choose to believe it or not. But you can logically deduce many of the things I've seen if you take the time to do it. I often say we live in the HD age, the high def age, and I make the statement: anything amazing that can be filmed in the high definition age will be filmed. And having said this, there's some things that people can go out and do for themselves. Rocket launches is one of them. There is no ground-based footage of a rocket going all the way. They arc out hard over the ocean, and many of the pieces of footage we can get our hands on, and there's lots of it. You can see the rocket coming back down, but most, as the hard arc begins to happen out over the water, the video cut look of that 2012 wave. But there it is. People see something like that, and one human response that you get is, "What the hell is that? It can't be real. I need to explain it away."
That's true. That's true. So then if you don't accept the moon as a rock in space, then are you saying that it's really not there, or are you saying that we're not seeing the real one that is there? I mean, or is this all just a hologram?
I started by trying to describe it as a hologram, and what happened is people latched onto that word and then started to say, well, how would the technology work? Where did the power come from? They even made erroneous statements like, well, how can that be? The Greeks saw it, the ancient Greeks saw it, which is not a logical way to go at this, because we see a moon in the sky, and I'm saying these things, so presumably anyone 1,000 years ago saw what we see. But to set all that aside, I call it a facade now, so that people don't get hung up on trying to figure out what that technology could be, because clearly whatever it is so far beyond anything we're familiar with or anything we've been told about or shown. It's kind of a waste of time to go down that road without more evidence and more information, right?
Right, absolutely. But now, if it really, so then you're saying that we've never been on the moon. Then we've never actually gone there. We can't get there. And so we're kind of prisoner. And I'm not debating any of this, because how do I know? I'm curious as to, how
transiting the moon. And so I got a camera, and not long after that, I filmed the best version of the lunar wave we have. And that's really what kind of put my nose to the grindstone.
I see. And what is that lunar wave? I seen that. As a matter of fact, before I even started getting requests from listeners to have you on, I actually, somewhere I came across that video and I seen it, and I thought it was interesting then, and I think it's interesting now. What exactly is that? I seen somebody had left a comment on one of the videos claiming that it was a camera defect. I don't know about all that. It looks like a little more than that to me.
Well, this is one of the problems with having a forum like YouTube to show your stuff. It's instant gratification. People come watch a video and make a snap judgment. They do not take the time to really investigate things in most cases, and the 2012 footage demonstrates that it cannot be camera related. One of the proofs in that footage is that I panned below the moon just by chance. The wave started. I didn't notice it, and I panned back up to the center of the moon, and the wave caught up to the camera. So I filmed it starting, panned above it, the wave caught up. But sometime later, we also noticed that there were energy pulses going on at the same time the wave starts. And after time, a video engineer demonstrated that in that footage, it was filmed at 8:30 in the fall evening, that the wave is not crossing the video frame. And that sets aside the fact that digital equipment does not fail in an organic way. Most people are familiar with how digital equipment fails. It pixelates, it makes very straight,